Okay, I started the recording.
Shabbat Shalom. Welcome, everyone. Glad to see all of you. Shabbat Shalom, Irma Shon. What a delight to see you. Welcome to those who are visitors and guests this morning to celebrate with Benji and his family. Mazal Tov to all of you. Very glad to celebrate with you. Just have a few minutes to gather ourselves. Good morning, Benji. Shabbat Shalom. You look wonderful. It's wonderful to see you. Once again, just wishing everyone Shabbat Shalom and welcome in. Glad to see all of you. Very glad to see the extended Whiting Eisemann clan. I think we're going to get Benji back in just a moment. Just checking. Can you hear me? Great, thank you. There he is. Good morning, Vanessa. Shabbat Shalom, Mazal Tov. Say thank you to our Gabayim this morning, to Amy Jaslow and Audrey Lyon, helping us to welcome everyone in and make sure we can see who we need to see at the right time. just almost ready to begin our morning prayers, and invite folks, if you like, to put yourself on speaker view. We're about to turn to Benji to lead us through the opening passages of the service. And we'll take up the Siddur, the Kol HaNeshama Siddur, and begin together on page 141. Page 141, and gather ourselves in this beautiful virtual tent. And Benji, what a delight to turn to you to lead us. Page 141.
Matzovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Matzovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael.
Let's continue with the morning blessings, beginning page 153. And it's a custom for all to rise in body and spirit in whatever way we're able. Page 153.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chei olamim, hama'avir shana me'inayim tumah me'afapai.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chei olamim, hanoten lasach v'ivina l'havchin b'num u'ben layla.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chei olamim, roka haaretz al hamayim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chei olamim, pokeach ivrim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chei olamim, malbish arumim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chei olamim, matir asurim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chei olamim, zokev kefufim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chei olamim, המלכים מצ'תי כופר.
Amen.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו חי עולמים שצדיק וצורקי.
Amen.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו חי עולמים ועוזר ישראל בגבורה.
Amen.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו חי עולמים ועוטר ישראל בתפארה.
Amen.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו חי עולמים ששני בצלמו.
Amen.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו חי עולמים ששני בן חורים.
Amen.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו חי עולמים ששני ישראל.
Amen.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו חי עולמים הנותן ליעף כוח.
Amen.
Continue page 165. We can be seated.
אלוהי נשמה שנתת בי טהורה היא. אלוהי נשמה שנתת בי טהורה היא.
אלוהי נשמה שנתת בי טהורה היא. אלוהי נשמה שנתת בי טהורה היא. אלוהי נשמה שנתת בי טהורה היא. אלוהי נשמה שנתת בי טהורה היא.
How beautiful to hear all of your voices together, welcoming us in. We're going to continue now in the Siddur, the Baruch She'amar, which the Hebrew, the original text is in your Siddur on page 177. I'd like to share this English version and ask you to join with me. Lie. Lai, 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 Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo. Lai, 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 Brucha Brucha hi uvaruch shema. Lai 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 Baruch hu Baruch shemo. Lai 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 Brucha hi uvaruch shema. Blessed is the one whose speech is the world. Baruch hu Baruch shemo. Blessed is the one forever creating. Brucha hi uvaruch shema. Blessed is the one speaking and acting. Baruch hu Baruch shemo. Blessed is the one separating and sustaining. Brucha hi uvaruch shema. Blessed is the one whose love fills the earth. Baruch hu Baruch shemo. Blessed is the one whose compassion gives life. Brucha hi uvaruch shema. Blessed is the one who brings us full circle. Baruch hu Baruch shemo. Blessed is the one living forever. Brucha hi uvaruch shema. Page 181. Yachid chei ha'olamim, melech meshubach, umefoar adeat shemo hagadol. Baruch atah Adonai, melech mehulal, batishbachot. Say amen. Let's go to now Psalm 150, page 231 in your Siddur. Hallelujah, hallelujah, bekodsho. Hallelujah, birkia uzo. Hallelujah, bigvurotav. Hallelujah, erov good Lord. Hallelujah, beteka shofar. Hallelujah, benevel vechinor. Hallelujah, betof umachol. Hallelujah, beminim beogav. Hallelujah, betziltzele shama. Hallelujah, betziltzele teruah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Lai, 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 lai. Kol haneshama tehalel ya. Kol invite us now just to take a deep breath together. We put all these ancient words in our mouths to help us activate a response internally, to help say, for instance, hallelujah, so that we can feel real praise inside, real gratitude for the many blessings we've been given. We'll turn now together to page 247. This is our time to call ourselves officially into prayer together, to say that we've done whatever warming up we need to do, and invite us all now to rise as we're able. Page 247.
Barechu et Adonai hamevorach. Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or uvorech choshech oseh shalom uvorech et hakol.
Continue now, page 253. Also transliterated on 255 so that we can all participate together, expressing our wonder at this beautiful world we've been given and appreciating the divine light that shines through it, whatever season we're in.
El Adon al kol hama'asim baruch u'mvorach befi kol neshama godlo v'tuvo malei olam dat u'tvuna sovevim oto hamitgael chayot hakodesh v'nedar bechavod על המרכבה זכות ומישור לפני כיסו חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו יצרם ודעת בבינה ובחסקל כוח וגבורה נתן בהם להיות מושלים בקרב תבל מלאים זיו ומפיקים נוגה נאה זיום בכל העולם שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם עושים בהם הרצון קונם פאר וכבוד נותנים לשמו צולה ורינה לזכר מלכותו קרא לשמש ויזרח אור רע והתקין צורת הלבנה שבח נותנים לו כל צבא מרום תפארת וגדולה שרפים ואופנים וחיות הקודש לי 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 Page 269. We pray that this universal light will also be harnessed for our people, and may we be worthy of it soon and in our days. Or chadash al Zion ta'ir, ונזכחו לנו במהרו. Baruch atah Adonai יוצר המאורות.
We want to turn now to the Ahava Rabbah, which will lead us into the Shema, beginning on page 273, and turn once again to Benji and his.
After Shema is the poem. So you're not on mute.
Yes.
Ahava Rabbah Tanu Adonai Eloheinu Chemla Kirula Vitera Chamat Aleinu Avinu Malkeinu Ba'avor Avotenu V'imotenu Shabbat Chuvecha Shabbat Chuvecha Avinu Malkeinu Bat Lamdem Chukei Chaim Kin Techunenu Tlamdenu Avinu Ha'av Rachaman Ha'merachim Rachem Aleinu Avinu Ha'av Rachaman Ha'merachim Rachem Aleinu V'tein b'libenu le'avinu le'askil לשמוע, ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. והרננו בתורתך ודבק ליבנו מצוותיך ויחד לבבינו לעבל יראה את שמך ולא נבוש ולא ניכלם ולא ניכשל לעולם ועד כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא פתחנו נגילה ונשמחה, נגילה ונשמחה בשועתך. ואבינו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו קוממיות, קוממיות לארצנו. כי אל פועל ישועתה וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול. סלע באמת, סלע באמת, להודות לך וליחדך וליחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. אמן. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
Benji, we'll just take a few moments now to say those middle passages of the Shema for ourselves quietly, and then in just a moment, Benji, for you to lead us again at the end of the Shema.
ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית וריתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם, אמן.
Benji, Yasher Koach, once again. We look forward to hearing more from you in just a moment. We'll pause here to share in an English reading which helps bridge between the Shema and the redemption song. It'll be on page 768 in the back of your Siddur, and we have some beloved family members who have been asked to share in this reading, but we don't have your names, so we don't know how to find you in the room. So if you would raise your hand, then our Gabayim can spotlight you so that we can see you as you share this reading. Page 768.
Hey, Mom, are you there? Mom, if you can hear me, you're up. All right. So, Rick, do you want to just go ahead and read the first verse?
Sure. Oh, I'm gonna come over here. Oh my goodness. Okay.
The first verse,
got it.
and then the second.
We cannot merely pray to you, O God, to end war, for we know you made the world in a way that we must find our own path for peace within ourselves and within our neighbor.
Okay, now Lib goes. All right. Lib, you're up. It was fine in practice.
I'm reading again.
No, wait, hold on. Lib? All right. You're up again.
All right. We cannot merely pray to you, O God, without prejudice, for you have already given us eyes with which to see the good in all people, if we could only use them rightly.
All right, we're over. Let's see, Amanda. Aunt Amanda, are you there? All the way from Switzerland? Okay.
All right, good. Okay.
This is representing the whole wedding side of the family.
Okay. We cannot merely pray to you, O God, to end starvation, for you have already given us the resources with which to feed the entire world, if we could only use them wisely.
And now you.
And now me. We cannot merely pray to you, O God, to end despair, for you have already given us the power to clear away slums and to give hope, if we would only use our power justly.
Okay, now let's walk this way and they come up.
Daddy.
We cannot merely pray to you, O God, to end disease, for you have already given us great minds with which to search out cures and healing, if we would only use them constructively.
Therefore we pray to you instead, O God, for strength, determination, and willpower, to do instead of just to pray, to become instead of merely to wish.
Amen. And thank you all for bringing your voices forward. We look forward to a chance to celebrate with all the family, including those who we couldn't hear this morning, but we're certainly very glad you're here with us. We'll turn back earlier in the Siddur to page 291. And to you, Benji, to lead us from this freedom song into the Amidah, page 291 first.
Mi chamocha, mi chamocha, mi chamocha, mi chamocha, mi chamocha, mi chamocha belim Adonai. kamocha, mit kamocha, mit kamocha, mit kamocha, mit kamocha, mit kamocha, nedar bakodesh, nora, tehilot, osef elei, nora, tehilot, osef elei, shira, shira, shira chadasha, shira, shira, shira chadasha, shira, shira, shira chadasha, shibchu geulim, לשמחה על שפת הים, לשמחה על שפת הים, לשמחה על שפת הים, לשמחה על שפת הים. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, ובטחנו ממך, יהודה וישראל. גואלנו, אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל. ברוך אתה אדוני, קהל ישראל.
Amen. Continue together now with the Amidah, page 295. Invite us all to rise as we're able. Go ahead, Benji.
Adonai שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך. אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו אלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, אלוהי אברהם אלוהי סברה אלוהי יצחק אלוהי רבקה אלוהי יעקב אלוהי רחל אלוהי לאה. האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון כל מלך חסדים טובים וקונה הכל וזוכר חסדי אבות ואמות, מביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר מושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני מגיל אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני רב ויושיע ומוריד אתה. מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי כל חי ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לישני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומידו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להיות כל חי. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה כל חי.
Amen. Continuing page 303.
נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום. ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה, ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל הארץ, כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול, אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול, מתנשאים לעומת שרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. 305.
Hold on, Benji, 1 second. Have a few more passages before we get there. Hang on.
ממקומך מלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון, בקרוב בימינו, לעולם ועד תשכון. תתגדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, ולנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראנה מלכותך, כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך. ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה.
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד קולך. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד קולך. ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש. בשבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לא ימוש לעולם ועד. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד קולך. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד קולך. כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, וקדוש אתה. כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, וקדוש אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Amen. A few moments now for us to say our own private Amidah quietly for ourselves. And then as we come to the end of our quiet, we'll turn back to Benji and family to lead us in our prayer for peace. Don't forget to unmute Benji and Vanessa as you're ready, but don't forget to unmute. Page 323 in our Siddur.
Is it done? Got it.
1, 2, 3.
What a beautiful gift. Thank you, Benji and Vanessa. Everyone, a chance to just absorb those sounds and the meaning behind them, to pray that all of our prayers ultimately lead to the possibility of peace, to renewing our faith in the possibility of peace, and that our prayers and all the prayers being given this Shabbat be heard by that place that hears our prayers. We want to turn now to our Torah service and turn once again to Benji and Kate and Vanessa. And I'm so glad, Addie, that you're here with us as well. And to hear Kate and Vanessa, your blessings for Benji as he comes to the Torah for the first time.
Okay, can you guys move over a little bit more? Okay.
Benji, one of the passages in your Torah portion that most resonated with you, which you opted to have embroidered on your atara, on your talis, is the commandment not to place a stumbling block before the blind. You understand this commandment to be... I knew that was going to happen. You understand this commandment to be not only a prohibition against intentionally creating obstacles for others, but also a commandment to affirmatively remove obstacles that may create an unfair disadvantage. I'm proud of your desire to help those less fortunate than yourself, and I hope you always commit some portion of your resources to help level the playing field for everyone. So far, your life has been relatively free of obstacles. You're fortunate to have many innate talents. You pick up new skills and ideas easily. But there will be a time, sooner or later, when you face an obstacle that you cannot easily overcome or navigate around. My blessing for you is persistence to achieve your goals even when you stumble, even when it's a struggle. And to remember, the greater the challenge, the greater the sense of accomplishment. But if you should ever find yourself facing an obstacle that you truly cannot navigate on your own, I also want you to know that there is no shame in asking for help. Ima and I and Addie will always love you and support you and be there to help you find your way. You also have an extended family of grandparents, aunts, and uncles and cousins who are also there for you. And you have a community at Adat Shalom who is also ready to support you. Today, many will congratulate you with the words Yasher Koach, which literally means, may your strength be firm. I hope that your strength to accomplish your goals in life remains firm, no matter the stumbling blocks. And I hope that as you clear stumbling blocks that stand in your way, you also remember to help clear the stumbling blocks that stand in the way of others.
And Yamim, when I told you I was struggling with this blessing for you, you just laughed. we agreed that really all I had to say was, quote, "You're amazing, keep being amazing, and remember to help out the world along the way." We were joking, but as it turns out, it's a pretty good summary. So, how are you amazing? Well, you are amazing to us because of your enthusiasm, kindness, independence, humor, and problem solving. When you were little, we took you to the doctor for an earache. You did not want the doctor to put anything in your ear and were fussing and crying. But then, all of a sudden, you stopped crying, you turned right to the doctor, and you put your finger in your ear. We all just stood there. The doctor said no child had ever done that. It was a creative, peaceful, and funny solution. To me, it sums up many of your strengths. And because you're amazing but not perfect, now if we can just get you off Fortnite, all would be good. And now here comes the keep being amazing part. May you always have gratitude for all that you have, whatever that may be, in times of want, and especially in times of abundance. May you continue to have the kindness to appreciate all those around you and the humor to enjoy it all. May you continue to be thoughtfully independent so you can always learn and be teachable and still keep your own counsel as well. And may you play less Fortnite. I don't know how you will help the world. You're not sure either from day to day. Surgeon, lawyer, financier, or something you haven't even heard of yet. But I have no doubt that you will always improve at least your corner of the world. The size of the corner will depend on you. On you.
Talit time, please.
Benji has his talit. So we'll now ask Kate and Vanessa if you would help him to take the Torah in hand.
Literally passing it to the next generation as we turn to page 387 and Benji leads us in the opening of the Torah service.
I'm supposed to pick this up. 387, yep. Oh, what page? Sorry.
387.
Is that right?
Be'anarachit v'lish mekarisha kadisha yakira ana amar tushbechan be'anarachit v'lish mekarisha kadisha yakira ana amar tushbechan yehira ava kodamach תפתח ליבי ברייתא ותשלים משלים דליבי וליבה דכל עמך ישראל ותבוא לחיים ולשלום אמן.
And continuing on page 393, Benji leads and we respond.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Gadol Adonai iti, Unerama Shemo Yachdav.
Put it down.
And where we would sing Lecha Adonai, please place the Torah back down. You can begin to take the cover off because in just a few minutes, Benji will take his place in the chain of generations, reading from it. Thank you. Such beauty already this morning, and such power from both generations. You'll hear many echoes of the wisdom that Vanessa and Kate, who give so much to this community and are so in tune with its ethos, that you'll hear many echoes of the blessing for Benji in the introduction to our Torah reading. So you can have a quick seat and take a breather. And You'll be back up in just a moment. Shabbat shalom, everyone. This week, Benji and others will be reading a double parsha, some from Acharei Mot, starting at Leviticus 17, with the classical Levitical concern over animal sacrifice, and then some from Kedoshim, which morphs that concern into ethics, rights, interpersonal moral norms. As Benji will both read and interpret, the central Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow person as yourself, is there. So is the activist call lo ta'amod al dam re'acha, don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. There's a link between those readings. Kedoshim is better known, but the animals, believe it or not, are worth a look. If you have a Chumash, Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11. This is page 775 in the old edition of the Plaut Chumash, or 875, 876 in the old. Sorry, 775 in the new, 875 in the old. Leviticus anywhere, chapter 17, verse 11. For the life of the body depends on the blood. Ki nefesh habasar badam hi. The nefesh, the life force, is in the blood. Verse 12, none of you, even the stranger in your midst, should eat blood. That's all applying, all about the blood and that it needs to be reserved for the altar for sacred use for sacrificial animals, ox, lamb, sheep, dove, domesticated, kosher animals. Verse 13, just below, if you capture a wild animal or bird from those that may be eaten, then shafach et damo, ritually pour out its blood, v'chisahu be'afar, and cover its blood with dust, with dirt, with earth. Why the difference in how we treat the blood of domesticated versus wild, even though both need to be treated as special? Rabbi David Seidenberg offers this. Domestic animals themselves are in a covenantal partnership with the people and with God. Domestication of other animals by humans was not or shouldn't be an act of domination, rather a relationship of mutuality, like a covenant between species. Now, if you think somehow animal husbandry is domination rather than covenant, remember the image Adonai Roi, God is my shepherd. The psalmist sure knew that shepherds at some point take a sheep's life, but along the way they love and protect and watch out. Thus the analogy of God caring for us as a shepherd would. Rabbi Seidenberg goes on, blood is the element of the body most connected to breath and soul, to flow, to life. So covering the blood of the wild animal is a quick way to give the essence of the animal a proper burial and to make the blood unusable for any secular purpose. So why was a domestic animal treated differently? Its life was already in the hands of its caretakers, herders, midwives, farmers, hands that nurtured the animal's life. Here's where it's heading. He continues, being in a fully covenantal relationship with another species is the only thing that allowed our ancestors to even slaughter their animals ever. He concludes, echoing our teacher, Rabbi Maurice Harris and others, this also teaches something vital for our time. Any system that does not treat an animal's nefesh as sacred is a violation of the Torah. Any system that doesn't treat an animal's soul as sacred violates Torah. Bringing that to today, yes, Jewish ethics embrace a wide range of views, for instance, on animal rights. But cheap, shrink-wrapped meat from factory farms hardly fits any ethical conception. The animal's misery, the livestock antibiotic overuse leading to drug-resistant bacteria, lagoons of waste polluting aquifers and sickening neighbors, and massive carbon footprint. So happy Earth Day. We can all agree on loving and protecting Earth and her creatures. But to make this happen, we have to face the cognitive dissonance between what we're used to and what we deeply know to be right and necessary. Leviticus challenges us to do just that. We're also one of over 1,500 congregations this weekend asking these uncomfortable, important questions. It's Interfaith Power and Light's Faith Climate Action Week. Which brings us to our second parsha, the famous and awesome Kedoshim, Holiness Code. The ethics are still resonant, as Benji will soon share. In those moral high points of Torah, do you remember a place where we hear that same metaphor of blood? Again, Leviticus 19:16, Lo ta'amod al dam reacha, usually translated, don't stand idly by while your neighbor bleeds. A central activist command, don't remain indifferent. Silence equals complicity. Bystanders are essentially perpetrators. But literally, think about the Hebrew, al dam reacha, don't stand on your neighbor's blood. It only makes sense in light of the verse we already saw, where we have to cover the blood that's already on the surface with dirt, the blood of a wild animal in that case, the exact opposite of covering the blood. Because if we don't question our impacts and choices, blood is spilled and we are part of it, human and animal. Blood symbolizes life, a covenantal connection with all people and all beings. We are interdependent, part of that web of life, or caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, as Dr. King said. This week saw a legal opinion that Black lives actually do matter, though true justice for George Floyd and so many others remain distant. And also, it was Earth Day and the White House Climate Summit. In this week's headlines, just as in Leviticus, it's all connected. Us and our daily choices, our fellow humans, neighbors, especially those least empowered, and all life on Earth. Us, each other, and all of life. After services, with help from some members, we'll continue this conversation exploring a Jewish angle on environmental justice, the centering of racial and social concerns within creation care and sustainability. But for now, Rishon, Leviticus chapter 17, page 775 in the New Platt or 875 in the Old, verse 8. Gil Rosen, reading in memory of his uncle Kenny Sharon, will chant, and Kevin Teichman, a longtime EPA leader who's done so much over the years on behalf of Earth and people, and is teaching for us tomorrow at 1 on climate change. Kevin, on behalf of our many green professionals and advocates, will have the first Earth Week Aliyah, Leviticus 17:8, reminding us of the sanctity of blood and of life.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen. Alehem tomar, ish mi-beit Yisrael u'min hager asher yagur b'tocham, asher ya'aleh olah ozavach, ve'et petach ohel moed, lo yivienu lasot oto l'Adonai, nichrat ha'ishahu mi'amav, ish mi-beit Yisrael, u'min hager b'tocham, asher yachal kol dam, v'natati fanai, b'nefesh ha'ochelet et hadam, v'chrati otam mikerev ha'ama, ki nefesh habasar b'dam hi, v'ani nitativ lachem al hamizbeach l'chaper al nafshotechem, ki hadam hu b'nefesh yechaper, al kein amarti l'bnei Yisrael, kol nefesh mikem lo tochal dam, והגר הגר בתוככם לא יאכל דם.
Baruch atah Adonai hamalamed Torah le'amo Yisrael.
Amen. Yishar kochachem and Zichrona Livracha to you, Gil, on the memory of your uncle, and Kevin, I would say, Chazak ve'amatz, your leadership is still appreciated and much needed as you continue on your own journey. We'll turn now to loved ones, grandparents, especially right now, of Benji and to Benji. So the reading will now continue Leviticus 19, verses 1 through 4, turning ourselves over to Parashat Kedoshim. As Rabbi Fred explained, we're in 2 parashiot this week. You can find the verses, Leviticus 19, beginning with verse 1, in the older Plout, page 894, in the newer version, page 798. And it's a joy to call Benji's grandparents, who are right there with us. Ya'amdu Michael ben Yaakov v'Beatrice v'Leah bat Shendel v'Avraham la'aliyah hashniya. We'll invite you to first say the blessings, Michael and Linda Eisemann.
Baruch hu et Adonai havarach.
Baruch Adonai havarach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai havarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher kirvanu ladat Torah, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Amen. V'daber Adonai el Moshe lemor, daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael, v'amarta lehem kadoshim tiyu, ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem, ish imo ve'aviv tira'u, ve'et shebetotai tishmuru, ani Adonai Elohechem, al tifnu el ha'alilim v'lohei Masecha lo tasu lachem, ani Adonai Elohechem.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'kayei olam natan b'tzokenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Amen. And Yasher Koach and Mazal Tov to these grandparents. I want to also acknowledge Kate. On your side of the family, we have loved ones with us as well. We can't see them right at this moment, but it's a real joy and an honor to recognize the generations in this celebration. We'll continue ahead with our reading. Same chapter, just as we are. Now Leviticus chapter 19, beginning with verse 5. And we'll now call Benji, your parents, to the Torah. Ya'amodna Chana bat Leah v'Michael v'Sara bat Isabel v'Richard la'aliyah hashlishit.
Baruch hu et Adonai havarach.
Baruch Adonai havarach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai havarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher kirvanu lavodato, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen. V'chi tizbechu zevach shalamim l'Adonai, L'rtzonechem tizbechu b'yom zivchachem yachel mimachorat v'anotar ad yom hashalishi b'shisaref v'im echol yachel b'yom hashalishi b'gul hu lo yiratzeh וכליו עוונו יישא, כי קודש אדוני חילל, נכרתה הנפש ההיא מעמיה, וקוצריכם את קציר ארציכם, לא תכלה, פאת צדך לקצור, ולקט קצירך לא תלקט, וכרמך לא תעולל, ופרת כרמך לא תלקט, לעני ולגר תעזוב אותם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'hayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Benji, we're so happy to hear you reading. We'll ask you to pause here and cover the Torah. Just lay the cover on top. We have a moment now to say a prayer for healing while the Torah is virtually or otherwise out among us, and we feel the strength of coming together around this ancient text. As we do each week, we'll invite people to share in the chat any names of loved ones who are in our prayers right now for healing of the body, healing of the mind, healing of the soul. And as those names are offered here in our chat, we can bring our voices together and send our own strength and our love for that possible healing. Please join me. Mi sheberach avotenu mekor havracha leimotenu. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu mekor havracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. Refuah shlema, full and complete healing for all those named here and for all those who remain in our prayers. We'll turn now to our final Torah reading of the morning and to Sue Marks, a wonderful teacher in our community who has been Benji's guide and mentor to bring him to this day. So Sue, to please call Benji to the Torah.
Yamod, Yamod, Yamod Bachor Bar HaMitzvah, Binyamin ben Chana v'Sara, Maftir Chazak.
We continue now with the Maftir reading, the end of Parashat Kedoshim, Leviticus chapter 20, verses 25 through 27. You can find it in your Chumash, in the older version, page 906, in the newer version, page 806. I think that's right. Again, Leviticus 20, beginning with verse 25. And Benji, first the bracha.
Baruch hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kirvanu lavodato v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch Ata Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
V'hivdaltem ben habehema tehora latamea uven ha'of hatameh latahor v'lo tishaketzu et nafshatechem babehema uva'of uvechol asher termos adama asher hivdalti lachem latameh v'yitem li kedoshim ki kadosh ani Adonai v'avdil etchem min ha'amim lihyot li ואיש או אישה כי אבהם אוב אוי תאונימו תומתו באבן ירגמו תם דמיהם בם. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו, ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen.
Amen. And Mazal Tov once again. We will invite everyone to rise here as we lift the Torah and dress the Torah. וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה. Vanessa, kol hakavod, you can be seated. Kate and Benji, if you would help her to put the wrap on the Torah and then to cover it. עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה ותומכיה מאושר. עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה ותומכיה מאושר. שלום 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 Shalom, shalom. It is a tree of life to those who hold fast to it, and all its supporters can be happy. It is a tree of life to those who hold fast to it, and all its supporters may be happy. Shalom, 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 shalom. Shalom, shalom. Kol hakavod, Whiting Eisemann team. Well done. Turn now, Benji, to hear your introduction and to your chanting of the Haftarah for Parashat Kedoshim.
Amos, the prophet who our tradition said wrote this morning's Haftorah reading, lived in the 8th century BCE in Eretz Yisrael. He usually kept to himself, avoiding the corrupt elements of society. When Amos went to the northern part of Israel, he didn't like that the people there were doing rituals without knowing why. He also disliked how people were so focused on money. He believed that all nations are equal in God's eyes, and because of this, is often called the prophet of justice. In addition to being a prophet, he was a shepherd and a tree farmer. Those occupations show Amos's intense connection to the land of Israel and to its plants and animals. In both my Torah readings and my Haftorah reading, the text describes the joyful return of the Jewish people to Eretz Yisrael. In Parshat Kedoshim, chapter 20, verse 24, the text declares that you shall inherit their land, for I will give it to you to inherit, a land flowing with milk and honey. In Haftorah Kedoshim, chapter 9, verse 14 and 15, Amos says, they shall rebuild the desolate cities and dwell in them, never to be uprooted from the soil that I have given them. Both these segments of text remind us of our connection to the land of Israel. This seems to come at an appropriate time, given that we celebrated Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's birthday, last week. Please follow along as I chant from Amos on page 814 in the New Plout and page 999 in the Old Plout. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratza v'divrehem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah uv'moshe avdo uv'nvi'eh ha'emet b'tzedek. Haloch ibnei choshim atem li b'nei Yisrael num Adonai. Halo et Yisrael eleti me'eretz Mitzrayim uflishim mikaftor v'aram mikir. Hinei Adonai Elohim במלאכה החטא והשמדתי אותה מעל פני האדמה אפס כי לא אשמיד את בית יעקב נאום אדוני כי הנה אנוכי מצפה ואני אותי בכל הגבוהים את בית ישראל כאשר ינוע בכברה ולא ייפול צרור ארץ בחרב ימותו כל חטאי עמי האומרים לא תגיש ותקדים בעדנו הרעה ביום ההוא אקים את סוכת דוד הנופלת וגררתי את פרציהן ורשותיו אקים ובניתיה כימי עולם למען ירשו את שארית אדום וכל הגבוהים אשר נקרא שמי עליהם נאום אדוני עושה זאת. הנה ימים באים נאום אדוני וניגש חורש בקוצר ודורך ענבים מושך הזרע והטיפו ההרים עסיס בכל הגבעות תתמוגגנה ושבתי את שבות עמי ישראל ובנו ערים נשמות וישבו ונטעו חרמים ושתו את יינם ועשו גנות יאכלו את פריהם ונטעתים על אדמתם ולא ינטשו עוד מעל אדמתם אשר נתתי להם אמר אדוני אלוהיך. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם צור כל העולמים צדיק בכל הדורות על הנאמן המרוסה המדבר ומקיים שכל דבריו אמת וצדק. נאמן אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ונאמנים דבריך ודבר אחד מדבריך אחור לא ישוב ריקם כי אל מלך נאמן ורחמן אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הנאמן בכל דבריו. רחם על ציון כי בית חיינו עולמך ישראל תושיע במהרה בימינו. ברוך אתה אדוני משמח ציון בפניה. שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו באליהו הנביא עבדך במהרה יבוא ויגל ליבנו והשיב לבבות על בנים ולב בנים על אבותם וביתך בתפארה יקרא לכל העמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מביא שלום לעד. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושה ולמנוחה לכבוד ותפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
Amen. Beautiful. We now look forward, Benji, to your words of Torah to help us connect the beauty that you've read with the beauty in your soul and in this community of interpretation.
This morning's Torah readings contain many commandments. It's unclear how some of these commandments apply to our lives today, such as the commandments about sacrificing animals. But I'd like to focus on 3 other commandments that, to me, represent a big part of what we can get from the Torah. Commandments that guide us to the best behavior and actions possible. First, in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 14, it says, "You shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind." To me, this is one of the more meaningful quotes in this portion. In fact, I selected this on my Torah, on my Talit. Its obvious meaning seems very straightforward. Don't be mean to people, even if they might not notice or not know who or what is blocking their way. But there's more. I see it as much broader. This means that you shouldn't make life harder for anyone, especially people with disadvantages. I also think this commandment can be thought of today even more broadly as to not deliberately do something to someone that you know is wrong, but instead go above and beyond and even help people and guide them as best you can. Second, in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, it says, "Love your fellow as yourself." But who is your fellow? And what does it mean to love your fellow as yourself? What if you don't really care how people treat you, or if you don't treat yourself well? Does this mean it's okay to treat others badly? My understanding of this commandment is that you are supposed to treat others with respect, care, and generosity, even if you don't care how others treat you. Some of these acts of kindness can be so small you don't even think about them, but so big that they can make someone else's day. Especially in today's pandemic, but even when things were normal. An act of kindness maybe was like lifting a person's spirit and could have all kinds of positive, unforeseen consequences. And when you do a good deed, the person receiving it will feel good, and maybe they too will do a good deed because they want others to feel what they felt too. Lastly, in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 9, it says, "You shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field." But how big are the edges of your field? And what would you do if you had multiple fields or a smaller field than most people? Would you have smaller edges, or was it one size fits all? Nowadays, most of us don't have fields to reap, so how does this commandment still apply to us today? I think that in order to follow this commandment, you can give food to people in need, still having enough for yourself, but leaving the edges of your field or the corners of your pantries and saving them for people who also need food. We don't just have to give food. We can give jobs, housing, transportation, and so many more. This morning, we can ask ourselves if we're truly fulfilling these commandments. My answer for me is definitely not 100% yes. I'm not always as helpful as I could be. Sorry, Moms and Addie. And I also have commitments to things in my life, like school, music, and sports. I would like to bake every day for the poor, volunteer at soup kitchens, and do fundraisers to make money, to raise money, or awareness towards problems and finding solutions. But it's hard to do that when I also have to go to school and practice. Maybe that's why there's still so much work left to do. Because we're also busy with family or with work. But we can always ask ourselves, are we doing as much as we can? That answer may not always be yes, but hopefully it will be yes more than often than no. I don't have time to do everything on the list I previously mentioned, but instead I focus on what I can do in my free time, like baking on the weekends. My mitzvah project is following the commandment that I previously talked about, which was saving the edges of your field for people in need. And since December, every other week, I baked at least 3 dozen baked goods to donate to the poor, or to a stranger. I will continue this for as long as I can, because I believe that it is important to help people in need, giving them a nice treat on the way. Shabbat Shalom.
Yishar koach. Excuse me. You've given us so much to rejoice over this morning, Benji, and also so much to think about. And Benji, I'm actually going to ask you to come back forward. I know that we're on Zoom and we're not in the same room, but Rabbi Fred and I, and really our whole community, have some words of blessing and love to share with you this morning. And you're going to need some time later today, maybe, to sit with the chat comments and just go through them and really absorb them. You can't possibly do it right now, trust me. Excuse me. You've already commented this morning and said some very wise things based on this rich part of the Torah that you happen to land on for your Bar Mitzvah celebration. I'd like to continue and offer a blessing to you by highlighting 2 important verses in this morning's parasha. Chapter 19, verse 15 says, Lo ta'asu avel b'mishpat. And we translate that as the commandment to judge fairly, that we must judge fairly. Now, none of us chooses when we're going to be born and what part of history we're going to get to witness. But you are coming into the first steps of your young adulthood at a time when just this week our country saw a major wall of unfair injustice finally begin to crumble. And that is something worth paying attention to and watching. As one of your parents said to you this morning, we don't know what role you're going to take in life as an adult. You'll have many options open to you, I'm sure. But you are certainly stepping into your adulthood at a time when there is enormous change around us. And perhaps, maybe, if we keep our eyes on that prize, we will build a society where it's possible to judge truly fairly and to let every life matter, and certainly the lives of people of color who have been treated so horribly unfairly for so long. And of course, the famous one of Parashat Kedoshim, which you mentioned in your Devar Torah, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you have to love your neighbor as you love yourself. It's such an incredibly rich and profound piece of Torah, and one that I want you to carry with you as a blessing for yourself from this celebration. We have a teaching from our Hasidic tradition, which says that we all carry a message in our 2 pockets. In one pocket, we have a message that says the world was created for me. And in the other pocket, we have a message that says, I came from dust and I'm going to return to dust. And that's a beautiful balance point for how we have to love ourselves. If we're going to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, we want to love ourselves in a balanced way, where we feel the inspiration and the call to be our very best, to share our gifts as you've done so beautifully this morning. And on the other hand, to realize that it's all very temporary and to remember our humility. So I bless you, Benji, with that sense of constant balance, to know that you are a person of so many gifts to serve this world, and that you're a human being also. Mazal Tov to you and to all your family. We're so incredibly happy to celebrate with you.
Amen. Wait, you're not done yet. Before bringing it home into the traditional blessing, one more little piece of Torah for you. With that incredible awareness that you had in the latter part of your Devar Torah, that we've laid out the work. We know more or less what we have to do. Are we up for it? Our sages wrote in Pirkei Avot, Hayom katzar v'hamlecha meruba v'hapoelim atzelim. The day is short, the work is great, and the laborers may not be up for it. V'hasachar harbeh, but the wages are tremendous. Uba'al habayit dochek, and the master of the house, God in metaphor, is knocking. I hope you feel that knock of holiness to help you do the incredible work that you're already doing and you have challenged us to do. That's right next to the famous passage that the work is not yours to complete, but you absolutely have to do your part. And I firmly believe your part will be tremendous and impactful and amazing. In that spirit, I bless you with the words of the tradition, and all are welcome to say, Ken yehi ratzon, so may it be, after each. And this is actually coming live from the bima, so feel it. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. Ken yehi ratzon. And now, the metaphorical candy throwing as we all say the blessing for reaching such a milestone. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ruach haolam shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Simin tovu mazel tovu simin tovu mazel tovu simin tovu mazel tovu simin tov yehelanu ulechol Yisrael yehelanu ulechol yoshvei tevel yehelanu ulechol Yisrael yehelanu ulechol yoshvei tevel. Mazel tov and yasher koach. Deep breath, everyone, as we let the power of his teachings and words and the Torah sink in. We transition now toward the end of the Torah service, page 441, as Benji closes with us.
Etz chaim hi lama chazikim ba v'tomechea me'usha terachea darchei noam v'chol netivotea shalom hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Kadesh
The proverbial doors of the ark have closed. And Benji, I hope we can all hold on to the absolutely gorgeous smile you gave us right after you chanted the very last tone of your Haftarah blessing. We can all feel enormous happiness at being with you this morning. We'll go to our closing prayers, first to the acknowledgement of losses in our community. I want to share, there'll be an announcement coming out to the community soon. Our member Todd Levitt mourning his mother Marilyn Levitt, and there will be some Shiva announcements coming up for this week as he and his family make their journey into their final farewell for her. Alea HaShalom. And to acknowledge those yortzites that are being observed this week, beginning with Vanessa, your grandmother and grandfather, Beatrice and Jerome Eisemann. Ross Dembling's father, Paul Dembling, Marty Tolchin's father-in-law, Jacob Goldsmith, Anne Laurie Wong's mother, Beverly Warren, Audrey Rhodes' father, Ben Berkowitz, Ethel Kessler's grandmother and Avi Goldscheider's great-grandmother, Ethel Kessler, Victor Resmovic's father, Mendel Resmovic, Greg Schofer's mother, Paulette Schofer, Kit Turin's mother, Betty Turin, Patty Friedman's mother, on the very first yortzeit, Elaine Friedman, Chaya Laufer's father, Avraham Goldband, Brian Krekel's grandfather, Simon Payne, Irma Schoen's father, Jake Shaneberg, Vita Weiss's mother, Harriet Weiss, Sharon Gershon's mother, Hortense Gershon, Nadia Bartol's grandmother, Sophia Ilian, Linda Kaxer's brother, Stephen Johnson, Peter Gillen's mother, Dolores Hertzmark, Jamie Banks' grandmother, Anna Knopp, Jorge Srabstein's uncle, Abraham Zilbergeld, Cheryl Collins' husband, our very beloved friend and our own member, Bill Franz, Norm Gelman's grandmother and Judy Gelman's great-grandmother, Shana Gelman, and Gordon Meyer's father, Sumner Myers. The Mourner's Kaddish is in our books on page 451. Ask all of those who are in mourning or observing a yortzeit to please stand. And I want to also acknowledge Sue Marks, who's remembering her mother, Edie Perlis. Page 451. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabbah. Be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uvizman kari v'imru amen. Yehe shmei rabba mevorach le'alam ulamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpo'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitale v'yithalal shemei dekudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush bechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shamaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. All of those memories for blessing, for insight, and for inspiration. Turn back just a page to page 445 and turn once again to you, Benji, to lead us, inviting everyone to rise as you're able.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שנתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו, ואנחנו קוראים, משתחווים ומודים, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד.
Yasher koach. Thank you.
Continue at the bottom of page 449.
ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Thank you. And we may be seated. And the party is about to get started. Well deserved. Those last lines, the image of one God, one world. We're moving toward that in all the ways that we can. Today is a good example of that. Our screen is replete with people from so many communities. Welcome to folks from Beit Mishpacha and maybe even BCC in LA still, and folks from the day school community, from government, from activism, from neighborhood, from so many communities in an incredible family's life and in this community's life. We are thrilled to have you all with us. And Benji did us all proud. Yasher koach. We're going to turn for some words on behalf of the community from our co-president, Marcy Greenstein.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. On behalf of the Adat Shalom board, I want to welcome all of you joining us near and far, as Rabbi Fred just pointed out. We're so glad to have you at our service this morning. A huge mazel tov to Benji. What more can be said? I think when you do look at the chat, Benji, you will see our collective pride in your davening, in your teaching, and we know all of the time and effort that goes into the work that you've done this morning and the joy that you've brought to your family and to all of us. A huge mazel tov. We are so lucky to have you, Addie, your moms, Vanessa and Kate, be part of our community, and continue along the road that you're traveling. As everybody knows, caring for the earth is baked into everything we do at Adat Shalom. But especially this week, we are, as we celebrate Earth Day, we're focusing on that. And tomorrow, in that celebration, our own Kevin Teichman, as has been mentioned, a retired EPA science advisor, will give a talk. Climate change, where have we been, where are we, and where are we going? And it may provide some models of what would happen under certain policies to our climate and to our economy. So we hope you'll join us tomorrow, Sunday from 1 to 2. The Zoom link is on Social Solidarity, as is everything we do. So we hope you'll check your inboxes for that email. And as always, feel free to contact us at presidents@adatshalom.net with any questions or concerns. Shabbat Shalom.
Yasher Koach. Thank you so much for all that you and so many volunteers do. That includes our Zoom Gabayim, Audrey stepping in, and Amy, and everyone who participates to make this service possible. Shortly, we will have breakout groups for those who would like to. All are welcome to stay for a little informal conversation, like an oneg table, and then we'll reconvene for some environmental justice conversation, those who want a little more Torah and a little more modernity put together. So much I had to look forward to, and the torch is now passed to the very capable younger sibling as Addie takes us out with the Kiddush on page 465.
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorot berit olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorot berit olam. B'nei u'b'nei b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam, oti le'olam, oti le'olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorot berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorot berit olam. Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorot berit olam. Al kinarach Adonai et yom ha-Shabbat vayikasheha savrei chaverai l'chayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Amen.
Shabbat Shalom. Celebrate as you will, break out as you can. Make sure everyone gets a chance to talk and share in the 15-minute span of these little random oneg tables in the virtue sphere. And keep letting Benji's words and presence sink in throughout this Shabbat and far, far beyond. Yasher Koach, Mazel Tov, and Shabbat Shalom.
Amy, can you make me not a host? I'm afraid if I click leave meeting, it won't exit the meeting. I just leave, right? I'm afraid that what happened last time happened again. You guys should be able to unmute if you want to. No?
Says,
Oh, now I can unmute. Now I did it.
Oh, it usually went automatically when we went to breakout rooms. Of course, we're in the main room, so maybe that's why. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Good to see you all.
Hi.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, because it said I couldn't unmute. Okay. Hi, everyone. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Hi, Marilla. So is everybody else on breakout? Is that it?
Yes. Yes. The breakouts will be ending in about 5.5 minutes.
Oh.
So this is our breakout.
This is our breakout.
Who has something fun to say?
Here, I can show you. We've been watching a bird. Oh, hi, Naomi. There's a bird out our windows. Whoop. I don't know if you can see it. You see a nest up there?
On that top shelf?
Yeah, on the top shelf, yeah.
Cool.
So it's kind of like having the zoo in our house. They've been nesting for about a month, and we observe the birds coming and going.
Very nice.
Did you figure out what kind it was?
Do you know? I don't know. My wife
Well,
thinks
you
it
can
might
just
be a
let me
mourning
see
dove.
it. If you can describe it, I can tell you.
I don't. My describing is like it's got wings. Got wings and a beak. There, can you see it? I don't know if I can.
I can just see the nest, but I can't see the.
Yeah.
Take a picture. I'll be right back.
Okay.
When my dad was living in Queens, a pigeon nested on his balcony one year. And he was just totally fascinated by the whole process. And every time you'd come over here, tell about how beautifully the pigeon took care of the eggs and took care of the little, whatever they're called, the little baby chicks or whatever.
Chicks.
And I was so amazed because he is not usually interested in anything except a book or a record. But he was totally fascinated. Of course, as soon as the little chicks took flight, he screamed in the porch. So that was the end of that.
He screamed in the porch.
One and only family.
That was it. Hold on.
Hi.
Yeah, I remember hearing about how these New Yorkers were so impressed that they had a tree outside their door, because they were used to living in high rises, and the concept of having a tree outside was so rare to them.
On the ripened bread. Okay. Ice cream. He always likes that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so I'll be back with this medicine.
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Any other fun stuff going on? Everybody else is muted.
Not in particular. I think Rachel's taking a well-deserved break. Naomi looks like she muted herself.
You got a mask, Marilla. Is somebody touring around your house? Oh,
You muted yourself, Meryl.
She can't unmute. Oh, there she is.
Oh, there. I don't know. It's so weird. Okay. Yeah, I'm at my dad's place, so they came in to take care of him, but he's sleeping. Yeah. What can I tell you? Oh, I'm doing something fun. I'm going to Shenandoah National Park on Monday.
Very nice.
I'm gonna stay at this. We're gonna go to the Skyland Lodge.
Skyline Lodge?
There? Have you been there?
No.
No.
What city is it in? What town is it in?
I think it's near Front Royal, but I'm not really sure. Not 100%. It's on the Sky. What's it called? The
Yeah, Skyline Drive.
Skyline Drive. Yeah.
I understood that bit.
I mean, I've never. Actually, Vicky says she took me there once, but it was like 30 years ago. I don't remember it.
Probably the same.
How are you getting there, Marilla?
We're driving.
Wow.
I
That's
think
very
Rick,
unusual for you.
yeah, very unusual. I think Rick was really worried about me. So he agreed to this plan, which normally we would never do. We don't have a car for the uninitiated, and we don't usually drive anywhere. But it's actually only like a 2.5 hour drive.
Right.
If you
avoid highways. If you go on the highway, it's 2 hours.
Right.
Are you going to avoid the highways?
Oh, yeah.
It'll be a gorgeous drive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
They're
we're
all
going
going to be coming back in about a minute, just a heads up.
we're going to
Okay.
St. Mary's City today.
Oh.
That's down near the water.
Oh, yeah. I'd like to go there, too. Never been
Yeah, we've been there by boat, never by land.
Am I still? Hey, Amy, I have a question to ask you. Can I just do something? So we want to schedule a webinar for Dot Shalom on gardening for wildlife, me and Sandy Levin. And I have a bunch of dates. I'm not clear who I send that to ask for.
I would send it, I suggest you send it to Rena and Shauna.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Okay, folks are going to be coming back. The room's closing in about 30 seconds. If they come, they may come back sooner. Yeah, Marilee, you're talking this afternoon, right? Okay, I'm going to make you. I'm going to make you a co-host so you don't have any problems with muting or unmuting.
Okay, yeah, she wanted to congratulate you on your latest piece, which we listened to and enjoyed. She's now out with the dog. So,
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, I
Thanks.
was in the shower. But if she wants to call me back when she gets back.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Bella.
Thanks. Bye.
Ya na 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 na, ya na 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 na, ya na 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 na, ya na na na, ya na 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 na, ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na, ya na na na, ya na 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 na, ya na 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 na, ya na 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 na, ya na na na. Good Shabbos. Keep the beauty of the morning and the wisdom of Benji, as well as the connection of the breakout, all with you as we go just another 30 minutes or so with a little Torah and togetherness. Rabbi Rachel and I were talking at the beginning of the week about what we should focus on for this little block that was blessedly open this time. And the two leading contenders were Earth Day, Earth Week, or racial justice and George Floyd. And so it felt right to simply unite the two. And so here we are. I'm going to lead off with some slides and texts, just a kind of an opening sense of environmental justice, this whole rich set of allusions that come with that phrase, and better understand it on its own and through the lens of Jewish values. And then we are thrilled, we have three members who are each prepared to offer a short piece to amplify some of the ways that we can plug in and some of the insights along the way. So I'm going to be screen sharing and moving quickly through the first half of this half hour. So everyone can hear me? We're good? Okay, buckle your seatbelts for some fast, beautiful Torah. And of course, I pressed the wrong button instead of screen share. Here we go. And where the thing is hiding the thing. Oh, yeah, okay. Here. Aha. From the beginning. Sorry about that. It was all set up. Here we go. Right. Judaism and environmental justice. This is the image. Judy Chicago's Rainbow Shabbat. We want to get there. People across every line of difference eating only organic, locally sourced food at the Shabbos table. There, okay? It's that simple. Environmental justice is in the way, rather environmental injustice. What does it connect to? It is partly racism and the legacies of systemic racism that disproportionately have people of color at adverse, disproportionate environmental impacts. It's colonialism, which does that same thing on a north-south basis, on a developed world and developing world bifurcation. And we see in COVID just how wide that gap is. We see it also in the impacts of climate change, but also poverty. It's race, it's also class. Ultimately, it's a question of do we care? It's those exact verses from before of, are we involved? Are we going to be bystanders, which means perpetrators, or are we going to be disruptors when a status quo is unjust and unsustainable? Most of us know the status quo to be unjust and unsustainable. The question is, how active are we in trying to change that? That's the frame for today. Worth giving a shout out to our interreligious friends in liberal American spirituality. United Church of Christ funded the very first groundbreaking study that documented this disproportionate harm. In many ways, 1987 and that important study by Ballard and others really opened the field. And then 4 years later, the National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit here in DC 30 years ago came up with these principles of environmental justice, which have been very influential in activist circles. The challenge, of course, is it took quite a while for the historic Reed white-led, what we call the Big 10 green institutions, Sierra Club, NRDC, EDF, all have done amazing work and all took a really long time to wake up to the reality of just how limited their view was. And some have pivoted beautifully of late, others are still coming along. There's so much wisdom here and in the related HEMES principles 5 years later that many nonprofits utilize, including Interfaith Power and Light, but this is all worth digging and learning and being part of the conversation. It did enter into American discourse under Clinton in '94, this executive order. And this was really forward-thinking language for literally a quarter century ago. Every federal agency shall make achieving environmental justice part of its mission. Identify and address disproportionately high and adverse human health or environmental effects. And it's of everything, its programs, its policies, its activities, and singling out minority and low-income populations. If we only had followed this, Dayenu. Unfortunately, there's been some backsliding since. The EJNet, Environmental Justice Net, has the beautiful thing at the top that the question is, are we looking simply to make sure everyone is equally impacted, or should people not be impacted in the first place? And obviously, this is a holistic vision. So environmental equity is a component of it. But even if we cross that Rubicon, the answer is not that the polluting sites for the toxic things that we buy on Amazon for cheap and that define the modern consumer lifestyle should no longer be made in Cancer Alley and instead should be made in Tony parts of Bethesda and Potomac, right? That's not the answer. It ain't gonna happen. And the disproportionate historic harm is devastating. But the answer is, why do we need those particular processes at all? What can we do through activism, through regulation, through scientific inquiry, through concerted effort to change that larger picture? A good Jewish frame for where these values come together is what some of you have heard me call the grand unification theory of Jewish values in the concept of the Shvi'it, the seventh year, or the sabbatical, or Shemitah. We see it in 3 different places in the Torah. And the first couple verses, when it first appears in Exodus 23, Parshat Mishpatim, scholars identify this as the oldest stratum of text that we have. So Shemitah is something that goes back to the very beginning as the corollary to Shabbat. We have Shabbat counting off sevens in a weekly sphere, and we have Shemitah counting off sevens on an annual basis. That becomes a 7-year cycle, a meta Shabbat, if you will. And it's so powerful what this is next to. Just look at it together. Chapter 23, verse 9 of Exodus, V'ger lo tilchatz. You must not oppress a stranger. You know the heart of a stranger. You were strangers in Egypt. And the very next line, V'shesh shanim tizra et artzecha. 6 years, go for it, and sow your land, V'asafta et tevuata, and gather in its yield. V'hashvi'it, but on the 7th, tishmetena. I put that word into the English in bold. Tishmetena, literally shmita it. It's a verb. The 7th year, tishmetena, let the land, and because it's not even clear the antecedent of it here, it's almost like let life, let yourself, let everything rest and lie fallow. And in the same breath, what's the rationale? Ve'achlu evyone amecha. So that, it's and, but it's called the vav conjunctive in the scholarly literature, which really is better translated as in order that, right? So in order that the poor of your people may eat. We are simultaneously privileging the experience and the long-term sustainability of the land and the immediate experience of the underprivileged humans around us. And not only that, but the rest of the web of creation, specifically what the poor don't eat, the wild animals do. V'yitram tochal chayat hasadeh. And so with your vineyard, your olive grove, which is essentially to say so with all of your means of production. Today, only 3% of America is directly involved in agriculture, but 100% of America is dependent on it. And in the trading economy that's developed, that means the same with your Office 365 subscription and your laptop, right? The same with your consulting gig, the same with your retirement portfolios. Make sure that cycles of rest and renewal and privileging the experience of underprivileged humans and of the rest of creation are part and parcel. It's really remarkable stuff. I realize I can't see the heading. So all of these are developed. We're not going to go into it, but for the poor, that's a whole branch of our ethics, including what Benji chanted and interpreted, and his mom so beautifully talked about the gleaning and the corners, payat, the paya of your sadeh, leave them for the poor and for the stranger. And the broader notion of Judaism and poverty, you are commanded to provide the needy with whatever they lack. That's Maimonides codifying Jewish law. Boom. That's for the poor. But it's also for the wild animals. And this gets to all of our powerful teachings about biodiversity and the need to keep that web of life strong, that they are there for their own sakes. Maimonides again. And he connects with all of creation, which is going to bring us to the second appearance of Shemitah in Leviticus 25 next to Jubilee. And in talking about those cycles in Leviticus, we learn, and that's coming up in just a couple weeks, the land must not ever be sold beyond reclaim. Ki li haaretz, says God, the land is mine. You are just strangers and sojourners with me. So a collective anava or humility is needed when we see this logic, and we see it in the Exodus 23 iteration of Shemitah, we see it being built in Leviticus 25, and we hear this echoed throughout our corpus of text and values, including don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor and love your neighbor as yourself, as we discussed from this week's Parsha. The reality is that our worst hit neighbors of all environmental degradations, but of the climate crisis most poignantly of all, are disproportionately poor and of color. They are under-resourced, structurally under-empowered. If we are not supposed to stand idly by the blood of our neighbor, and we're supposed to privilege the experience of the earth and the land, and we're supposed to ensure that the underprivileged get front and center in social and economic and political discourse, and all of that is Torah, then what does that mean as global CO2 continues to rise, and we're doing too little about it. Here are frontline people reminding us climate change affects those frontline people, those living on coastlines in equatorial regions, in very poor countries that did the least to emit but are most affected. Climate change affects them the most. It can happen anywhere, the affluent coasts of New York and New Jersey, or the horrors that unfold year after year in Bangladesh, Indonesia, India, etc. We've seen it in Paradise, California, and so many other paradises, right? And so we are all vulnerable to climate change. Some are more vulnerable than others. That needs to be front and center in an environmental justice approach to these big questions. And that's where religion comes back in. Love your neighbor as yourself. In the global village, love the Bangladeshi. We don't know their name. They may or may not be making horrible wages sewing the clothing that we wear, but they are absolutely affected by sea level rise as a low-lying country that's the 6th most populated on Earth and only the size of Iowa. So global South lives matter and Black lives matter. And I love this of the many signs that flourished in the last year, the combination of Leviticus 19, love thy neighbor, and BLM, Black Lives Matter. This is the connection that we need to make over and over. Hear these texts again. Lo ta'amod al dam re'acha, do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. Ve'ahavta l're'acha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, no exceptions. So all humans are created in the divine image, even as all of creation testifies to God's glory. And we're supposed to love our neighbor, and there's no exceptions. So who's at our Rainbow Shabbat table? In the Leviticus 25 version, Veshavta haaretz, the land is personified as something that gets to experience the Shabbat. Beautiful language. And then in the 7th year, it gets to take a Sabbath of complete rest. And here we remind ourselves that even in our own midst, there are the disadvantaged. Look at the list toward the bottom. Who gets to eat what the natural produce of the land? You, meaning the empowered owners of the house, but also your male and female slaves or servants, the hired and bound laborers who live with you, and your cattle, and the wild animals in your neighborhood. So from the empowered humans to the domesticated humans, and then from the domesticated animals to the wild animals, all are in that circle of compassion and concern, because ultimately that circle broadens to the entire Earth. The spaceship Earth image, so appropriate for Earth Day, and the famous parable from Vayikra Rabbah of we all pay for our passage on the boat. One has a drill, starts drilling under their seat, right? It's claiming property rights, claiming the radical individualism of the modern ethos. I paid for this seat, I get to do what I want with it. When, of course, the water will rise and flood us all. And finally, again, here it comes in Deuteronomy, specifically in the economic justice context. Practice Shemitah every 7th year, which here includes every creditor remits the due that they claim from their fellow. This is not capitalism on steroids. This is, I will loan you stuff for short periods of time. We will have a sharing economy. We will all be able to advance because we get to play Monopoly for 6 years. But on the 7th year, we press reset. And on the 50th, we press hard reset. This is Torah. And don't harden your heart and shut your hand against a needy person around you. You must open your hand, lend them sufficient for whatever they need. And don't think, okay, I'm going to step back from all this because the 7th year is coming and I don't want to be out on my loan. The point is not your bank account. The point is society as a whole. That's exactly what Deuteronomy 15 is telling us. So give readily and have no regrets when you do so, because ultimately none of it's yours. So at least make sure it's invested in socially responsible with ESG screens. But even more than that, think about how much is rightly ours and how much ought to be elsewhere. The same goes with how much carbon we consume in a year. Some of you know Judith Helfand, an old friend. She's been on this very bima and has this amazing documentary of the heat wave in Chicago in the 90s that killed over 700 people just in greater Chicago, almost entirely people of color. And we were on a panel together right before the panel that Mirala and I were on together at the big, bold Jewish Climate Fest a couple months ago. And these were her notes in thinking about this and what my role on the panel would be. So I'm just quoting her. Isn't examining, exploring, reframing text a core part of our tradition? So what about reframing entrenched systemic problems, structural racism, and the climate crisis? And take note, it does help, but what's going on that renaming something, calling it a public health crisis, which it is, or an emergency, which it is, can finally help move hearts, minds, and dollars toward actual change. So that's some background on EJ. You're going to hear more about it from Kevin Teichman tomorrow at 1 o'clock. This is a screen grab from Social Solidarity. And we're going to turn now for a couple minutes each from first David Widowski, who reminds us that the current EPA and its new administrator, Michael Regan, is saying some really good stuff. That's this slide. And then Mirala Goldsmith with an action item from Jewish Earth Alliance, and then Naomi Edelson bringing it home with thinking about our historic partnership with communities along the Anacostia and how the needs and realities can be so different just 8 miles to our east, or 3, depending on which part of Montgomery you're in, and the need to keep all of it in mind all at once. David, take it away.
Sure. I'm just going to, I'm going to put in the chat, actually, an excerpt of a email that Administrator Mike didn't get the whole thing. Whoops, didn't get the whole thing. Oh, well, we'll figure out some other way. It's okay. We'll figure it out later. I'm honored to work at EPA along with a number of our co-congregants who have worked or continue to serve the mission of protecting health and human health and the environment at EPA. And it's just thrilling when we talk about justice and racial justice and the intersection with environmentalism. The first Black man serving as the administrator of EPA, Michael Regan was confirmed last month by the Senate, and his commitment to environmental protection for all of our citizens is just inspiring and thrilling. And I'm lucky enough to have leadership over a number of different programs at EPA that we are being given the privilege to focus more and more on solving the challenge of environmental justice. So Administrator Regan sent an email to us a couple of weeks ago reiterating our commitment to environmental justice. I'm just going to read a couple of excerpts from it. I tried to post it into the chat. Didn't do a great job of that, but we can share that around later. And what Administrator Regan mentioned in the context of protecting human health and the environment, he wrote on April 7th, "I believe we must be explicit about the full meaning of this important mission, recognizing that our responsibilities are to protect the health and environment of all Americans, including those historically marginalized, overburdened, underserved, and living with the legacy of structural racism." And he goes on later to say, "Too many communities whose residents are predominantly of color, indigenous, or low income continue to suffer from disproportionately high pollution levels and the resulting adverse health and environmental impacts. We must do better." He goes on, "We must consciously and affirmatively pursue justice." Does pursuing justice ring a bell with anybody? "As we confront environmental and climate challenges, this is our collective task. I tried to write down what our bar mitzvah today, Benji Rabbeinu mentioned in his Devar Torah. You shouldn't make life harder for anyone, especially with those with disadvantages. And so when we are working to identify opportunities to use our policies, to use our regulations, to use our grant programs and our voluntary programs to help alleviate these systematic institutional injustices that have made it difficult for communities of color, indigenous communities, low-income communities, as I mentioned, around the country to even breathe. I think about the words from the poet Emma Lazarus, send me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. So many of those communities, children in those communities, just by the act of breathing, the pollutant loads that they carry from fence line emissions from various kinds of industries are challenging their very lives and the families and the communities that they live in. So there's things that we're doing at EPA. There's things that a lot of the organizations that Rabbi Fred mentioned are doing. And I also want to encourage each of us to think about some of the things that we can do. There are the large organizational involvement we can have, but there's a lot of purchasing and lifestyle decisions that we can make that you may not be familiar with how it affects environmental justice communities or those disproportionately impacted. You can walk through almost any room in your house, in your kitchen, in your bathroom, looking at your bookshelves, look in your closet, the dyes in your clothes, the paper that may be throughout your house, the adhesive that holds your carpets together. These are produced by companies, manufacturers, facilities that often border environmental justice communities and disadvantaged communities. And there are choices that you can make by choosing to purchase and live sustainably. And so I would encourage us to, as on Earth Day and this week that we're talking about environmental justice, to think about what we can do collectively, what kind of organizations we can support, and what kind of individual decisions we can make to minimize and eliminate the impact on those communities that deserve justice and have been waiting so long for that justice. And with that, I'll turn it back to Rabbi Fred and the other folks.
V'nomar, amen. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Mirala, please.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
No one answered me. No.
They're all on mute. Good doobies. Yeah.
3 summers ago, Kayla and John, my parents and I, had the amazing opportunity to take a boat ride with Green Faith out to see the first offshore wind farm in the United States. And it was the most inspiring and exciting opportunity. Just picture us standing on the deck of this boat under the huge blades of this wind turbine turning above us with an interfaith group all singing, saying prayers and all kinds of wonderful things. There wasn't just the technology though. It was the fact that we were accompanied on this trip by a scientist from the National Wildlife Federation who told us about how in the construction of this wind farm, the whales were protected, and we were accompanied by the steward of the local steelworkers union, who told us about how the steelworkers were proud to be part of this incredible project and to work on something that was really going to move their community into the future. Right now, we're at one of the most exciting moments for moving forward on this grand theory of everything that Fred talked about. We can heal the climate, we can protect all of creation, and we can provide good and honorable jobs for all Americans. President Biden has announced the American Jobs Plan, which will do all of these 3 things. And with a special emphasis on environmental justice, 40% of all investments are to go to disadvantaged communities. So these 3 goals work together in this plan. And I'll just, there's many, many, many things in the plan. I'll just give one example. Billions of dollars will be directed to spark the electric vehicle revolution, which is really important because transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. You've probably read that the plan talks about installing 500,000, 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations, but it's also going to be the most largest investment in many, many decades in public transportation. And that's going to make it possible for people who've been disadvantaged and have never been able to access these jobs to get to these good jobs that will be developed in the clean energy economy. So that's just one example. Well, we need public support to make this a reality. It's just an idea. It's just a plan. Although the most unprecedented one, it's the biggest one that would address climate change that we have ever seen. We need public support to make it a reality, and it's possible. Just last week, Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia, I'm sure you all know that he's, the key vote that we have to get on so many different things, joined the United Mining Workers of America, that's the coal miners union, to say that they, Manchin and the coal workers, would support this plan because they understand the need to transition to clean energy, and they're willing to do it if those jobs will be good union jobs, and that's part of the plan. So public support is the only thing that can make this a reality, and I'm basically talking to you today to ask you to please raise your voices. And you can do that in a couple of ways. One is talk to your friends. Many people, I think, are just so tired from this pandemic that they're not even paying any attention anymore. Talk to your friends and let them know that this is happening, the American Jobs Plan, especially your friends in all those key states, the purple states and the red states. And then you and they can contact your senators and let them know that you want them to support a robust and bold version of this plan when it moves into the legislative stage. And you can find more information about this by going to Jewish Earth Alliance and looking for our action alert, which can help give you the background and help you to write or call your senators. You can also look for dayenu.org, just like the song on Passover, and they'll put you through by phone, right straight through to your senators. So please get involved. This is the moment when we can make these huge strides toward healing the planet, toward protecting all of creation, toward providing the social sustainability, the economics, the good, honorable living for everyone in this country, and bring it all together with environmental justice. Thanks for inviting me, Fred. Shabbat Shalom.
V'nomar, amen. And thank you so much. You'll hear more from Mirala as well as me on Shemitah as it comes closer. And it's a beautiful segue. By the way, if you haven't signed up on JewishEarthAlliance.org to get those action alerts, strongly recommended. But the opening image of that boat tour, I'm going to go to gallery view and see how many people were on the boat tour that Adat Shalom took of the Anacostia about a dozen years ago with an environmental justice focus. Okay, so all right, so we have a couple. It's clearly time to do something like that again, but it's been part of the synagogue's DNA to get involved and to actually see from roadside and waterside what some of those communities look like. And the Anacostia is simultaneously a symbol of division and challenge, particularly in DC, where it divides the under-resourced wards 7 and 8 from the rest of the city. But it's also in many ways a promising story because so many species of fish are back and the water is so much cleaner than it ever was. And the Anacostia Watershed Society and River Keepers have done amazing. In the middle of all of that is our own Naomi Edelson to be our last presenter this morning. Please.
Hi, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, Naomi Edelson. And I took a great advice from Rabbi Fred back almost 10 years ago to create a program called Sacred Grounds. And we started it at Adat Shalom, and we piloted it also in the Anacostia region of Washington, D.C. with Reverend Banks of East Washington Heights Baptist Church. And he continues to be a huge leader for us in this environmental space. And we are working with him and now 8 other congregations in this watershed to plant native plants to help people and wildlife. Everything that we're doing upstream of the Anacostia River, the Cabin John flows into the Potomac, the Sligo Creek, which is in the Silver Spring, Tacoma Park area where a lot of our members live, everything we do in those areas flows into that Chesapeake Bay, some of it into the Anacostia, which meets up with the Potomac. And so our we are creating, it's the same idea as the siting of those plants. When we do something upstream, letting our dog poop next to one of those places and not cleaning it up, letting invasive species go rampant in our yards, and putting fertilizers and chemicals, we are contributing to the pollution, which ends up in the Anacostia River in that region and hurts all those people who live there and fish there and enjoy that place. And so we are creating and working together with these congregations to care for the Anacostia by putting native plants actually in our yard, which will slow the flow of the water and the pollution, and also create habitat for wildlife. And it's a beautiful project, and we're going to be doing a lot more partnering with Reverend Banks and all these other congregations, and we're going to be doing more on sacred grounds on our property at Adat Shalom. And we're going to host a webinar soon about how you can do this at your home and help ensure that you slow the flow and don't contribute to more pollution for the people of color who live along the Anacostia and other parts of the Chesapeake Bay. Thank you.
Yasher Koach. For those who don't know, Naomi is a co-chair of our Green Tikkun Committee. Mirala with Stu helps run the climate action team. We have lots of places just within the life of the synagogue to stay connected, as well as groups like Dayenu.org, Jewish Earth Alliance, etc. Thank you for all of this wisdom. I imagine that the presenters would be willing to stay if they can for a few minutes for some schmooze, but we're going to wrap this up as a whole to say thank you. And just to note the pride of being part of a community that has these kinds of members and this kind of perspective and this kind of leadership. It means so much. And we can never rest on our laurels, which is precisely the point of each Earth Week, of kind of ratcheting up our climate ambition, of ratcheting up our consciousness of how all of these pieces fit together, and of really making sure that Black Lives Matter and that historically marginalized voices, we center them. Not just they get centered, we help center them in this larger discourse and build those connections. That is part of what a 21st century spiritual, connected awareness is going to have to look like. And let's use this week's confluence of the reminder of the horrors of historic injustices still being done to people of color with a glimmer of the possibility of a change, coupled with the more ambitious targets that Biden and other world leaders announced this week. It's going to take public pressure. It's also going to take us redoubling our own commitments, questioning again our impacts, and learning more about and getting involved in the kinds of amazing initiatives that we're hearing from Naomi, from David, from Mirala, from Kevin tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and so many. Thank you. We'll go out with the tree of life again. Eitz Chaim Hi. Torah is a tree of life. May we all enjoy its fruits. Yai na 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 na, yai na 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 na, yai na 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 na, yai na 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 na, ya na 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 na na, ya na 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 na, ya na 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 na, ya na 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 na, ya na na na. Thank you all. Shabbat Shalom. And can we do an unmute, Amy? Figuring out how?
People should be able to unmute themselves.
Excellent.
Shabbat Shalom. What a bountiful morning. Thank you, Fred, for your leadership and those participating in the last hour. Wonderful.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you for putting the program together.
Special shout out Rabbi Lisa and Tracy from BCC in Los Angeles, incredible leaders in Jewish social justice and equality work. And we're so honored that you're with us through the entire morning. And so especially given the hour that you had to log on at. Thank you.
We're
Dave,
grateful
I have a
to be
question
part
for
of it. Thank you.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Who's going to be, who measures well how the emissions are being reduced? That's what I've never understood.
Well, there are a few different systems. Ethan McMahon in our congregation works with some of our folks in our air program, and so there are different types of emissions reporting that goes on, both through facilities reporting their emissions. They report hazardous waste through our waste program. They report air emissions through our air program. Water emissions are reported both from facilities and water treatment plants. I happen to run, among the programs I lead at EPA, was born out of environmental justice. It's called the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act work on the toxics release inventory. And it requires facilities to report on their management of toxic waste, including recycling, reducing their emissions. And so through that reporting tool, we can track over time, and you can map it. You can look at over time, you can look by industry, what the emissions look like for a facility, what it looks like for an industry, and what it looks like nationally. And so there's a lot of tools at EPA. And if you're interested, you can contact me. I can point you to a bunch of those tools. And I think that that's kind of pointing towards and encouraging entities either through the carrot or the stick is a lot of what we do and what I do. And trying then to measure it and manage it and make it transparent is really what that community right to know, and communities do have a right to know, and individuals do have a right to know. And that's what some of the work that we do and the substantial investments that we make to make that information transparent.
Thank you.
TRI, toxic release inventory, is one of those examples where non-experts' eyes glaze over, and it may not feel particularly Shabbostic to get into those details, but that is where justice, sustainability, and public health happen. And it is really important that we get to know that vocabulary as we get to know vocabulary like tzedek and shmita, et cetera, because that's how those values get actualized in American life.
And I just add one more thing is that, there's the identification of the problem, and then, what are the solutions, and what facilities are required to do now is also report where they have taken, made investments or taken action through practices or investments to reduce their pollution releases through what's called source reduction or pollution prevention. And so we have a huge amount of information about the types of practices that are more sustainable. So we talk about what can businesses do. Yeah, you don't have to put a toxic facility in Bethesda. You can change the way you produce that material, and then it can go anywhere. And I think that's what another part of the programs that I lead are focusing on, are those practices that are sustainable, can be documented, can be used for training and adoption by facilities, so that we obviate those emissions rather than trying to place them into some place where people can accommodate them.
Can I ask how much of this got jerked around by the national politics and had to be restarted in the last year?
On a scale from 1 to lots, I'm going with lots. Boy, the stories I could tell you, Ralph, like you wouldn't believe.
No, I mean, I appreciate that you guys kind of hung in there and kind of stayed low, and that you're still there, so we didn't lose the momentum completely.
Oh, the Capitol Hill, you mean the one that?
I'm into that. So anyone else who wants to ask or continue the conversation, feel free. If you just want to greet, go for it. But some of us have been in front of our screens for longer than is appropriate on Shabbat at this point. And in the name of decency and human rights, we're going to call this concluded as a group endeavor. Thanks again, Amy and Audrey, our Zoom Gabayim. Thank you so much, David and Mirala and Naomi. Thank you for being the community that this is. Good Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom.
Final goodbyes before I end the meeting. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Have a good week.
Shabbat shalom.